Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive.
Mhm.
Today, we are going to be taking a look at the 2025 outlook for general liability insurance. And,
Mhm.
we talk about this stuff all the time, but businesses really need to be prepared for what's coming down the pike.
Right.
I've been looking through some of the articles and the research that you sent over, and I think we got some really interesting stuff to talk about today.
Yeah, there's a good mix in there, I think, of kind of good news and then some things to be aware of, for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the good news first, right?
Okay.
It seems like the general liability insurance market is finally kind of like taking a little bit of a break after, what felt like years of these rate
Yeah,
hikes.
I think that's right. A lot of the sources were pointing to that we had a few years there of pretty steep increases.
Yeah.
And it seems like things are moderating a little bit, at least for now.
Yeah. So, we're not seeing those, 20, 30%
Yeah.
increases that businesses were seeing, even just last year.
Hopefully a little bit more predictable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's good news.
It is.
But like you said, there's always, another shoe waiting to drop.
There's always something, right?
So let's talk about some of those potential headaches.
Okay.
And one of the things that really jumped out at me from these articles was just how litigious uh, society is. It seems like everybody's ready to sue everybody these days.
Yeah, it's America, right? That's what we do.
Right.
And this is something that comes up in a lot of these sources is that, we talk about inflation as it impacts, everyday prices.
Yeah.
But, have you ever thought about inflation as it applies to lawsuits?
Social inflation.
Social inflation.
I love that term.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
really fascinating. So tell me more about that.
Well, it's basically, like think about the cost of a lawsuit. It's going up just like the price of, a gallon of milk or something.
Okay.
And, one of the big drivers of this is jury awards are just getting bigger and bigger.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, some of these sources are talking about what they call nuclear verdicts,
Hmm.
which are these settlements over $10 million.
$10 million. Wow.
Yeah. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And these are becoming more and more common. And you can imagine, for businesses, that can be really devastating.
Yeah. So it's not just that there are more lawsuits.
Right.
It's that the lawsuits are more expensive.
The stakes are higher.
Wow. Okay. So what kinds of cases are we talking about here?
Well, we see these nuclear verdicts across a lot of different industries.
Mm.
But some of the areas where we're seeing them most frequently are things like, product liability,
Okay.
medical malpractice,
Yeah.
employment practices liability. Those are really kind of the hot spots right now.
Okay. So that's pretty scary for any business owner, right? To think that, one lawsuit could potentially wipe you out.
It's a big risk for sure.
Okay, so let's move on to another emerging risk that I saw in these articles.
Okay.
And that is this whole thing about biometric data. More and more companies are using things like facial recognition, fingerprints, all these biometric technologies, and it seems like the laws around this are still a little bit murky.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a new frontier, right, in terms of personal information.
Okay.
And in the U.S., we don't have like one federal law that
Oh.
governs all this.
Oh.
Instead, it's like this patchwork of state laws.
Oh, wow.
Some are stronger than others,
Okay.
and it creates a lot of uncertainty for businesses.
So I'm thinking, I've got my general liability insurance policy. Does that cover me if there's a problem with biometric data?
That's a good question. And, that's one of the things that these articles are really highlighting,
Yeah.
is that there's a lot of gray area here.
Oh, really?
So, some businesses might try to make a claim under, the personal and advertising injury part of their policy,
Okay.
arguing that, a data breach is a privacy violation.
Yeah.
But insurance companies are pushing back on those claims more and more.
Oh, my.
And the courts haven't really given us a clear answer yet.
So it's like a big legal battle.
It is.
Yeah.
Between, businesses and the insurance companies over who's really responsible when these things happen.
Right. And meanwhile, you've got all this data out there and you don't know,
Exactly.
who's on the hook if something goes wrong.
You got it.
Okay. So we've got social inflation. We've got biometric data. And then the third thing that really stood out to me from these sources was this whole issue of active assailant incidents.
Yeah, this is a tough one.
It is. And unfortunately, this is a trend that doesn't seem to be going away.
No, it's not.
One of the articles cited some FBI statistics that said active shooter incidents have increased by something like 89% in recent years.
Yeah, it's alarming.
That's a scary number.
It is.
So, I mean, you'd think that, you have insurance to cover these kinds of things, but
Yeah.
from what I understand, most standard policies don't really address this.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. A typical general liability policy is going to exclude coverage
Okay.
for acts of violence, um, especially anything that's considered terrorism.
Mm.
So businesses really need to think about getting specialized coverage.
So like an active assailant policy or something?
Yeah, exactly. An endorsement or a separate policy.
Okay, so now on top of all the usual things,
Right.
you know, slips, trips, and falls, businesses have to worry about, lawsuits stemming from social inflation data breaches
Yep.
and, active shooter situations. It's a lot.
It's a lot to think about, that's for sure.
Yeah. So what do we do about it?
Well, luckily, these sources also offer some pretty practical advice
Okay.
on how to kind of navigate all of this. So let's maybe dig into that next.
Yeah, let's talk solutions.
Solutions.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the things that businesses can do to protect themselves? Well, one of the big takeaways from all of these articles
Yeah.
is that knowledge is power, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you wouldn't climb Mount Everest without a guide. And navigating the world of liability insurance can be just as treacherous these days.
So we need a Sherpa
Yeah, we need a Sherpa.
for our insurance journey. I love it.
Exactly.
Okay, so who are these Sherpas? Who are these guides?
Well, the sources all kind of recommend working with risk management professionals.
Okay.
These are people who understand the insurance market. They can help you assess your risks and really kind of develop a tailored strategy for your business.
Okay, so it's all about being proactive.
Absolutely.
Got it. Got it. And speaking of being proactive, one of the other things that came up a lot in these articles was the importance of having strong safety protocols in place.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, things like employee training programs, especially when it comes to active assailant preparedness.
Yeah.
Um, really creating a culture of safety within your organization.
So it's not enough to just have a plan.
Yeah.
You've got to make sure that everybody knows what to do if something happens.
You got to practice it.
Okay. Okay. And here's one that I always kind of roll my eyes at, but the sources really emphasize the importance of documentation.
Oh, documentation is key.
I know paperwork, not my favorite thing.
Nobody likes it.
But why is it so important in this context?
Well, think about it this way. If a liability claim does arise,
Yeah.
having good records of your safety protocols, your training logs, inspection reports, all of that stuff can really help you build a strong defense.
So it's like proof that you were doing things right.
Exactly. You're not just talking the talk. You're walking the walk.
Okay. Can see that.
Yeah.
All right. And then the last thing that I wanted to touch on was this whole issue of transparency around data collection.
Right.
Especially with all this biometric data floating around.
Yeah, I mean,
How can businesses be more transparent?
I think it comes down to building trust with your employees and your customers.
Okay.
Be upfront about what data you're collecting, how you're using it, how you're protecting it.
Yep.
Don't bury it in some long privacy policy that nobody reads.
Yeah, right? Like those terms and conditions that we all just click through.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like a relationship,
It is.
right? You got to be honest. You got to be upfront.
Yeah.
People are more likely to trust you if they know what's going on.
Absolutely.
Okay. So just to kind of recap what we've learned here, the general liability market, it seems like it's stabilizing a little bit, but
For now,
right? But there are still some big risks out there.
there are
Social inflation, biometric data, active assailant incidents.
a lot to think about.
And the key is to be proactive, to work with risk management experts,
Yep.
to have strong safety protocols in place, and to be transparent about your data collection practices.
All of that.
Anything else we should add to that list?
I think that covers it pretty well.
Okay, good. So, all of this is super helpful, and I really appreciate you sharing these sources with me, but there's one thing that I didn't see mentioned in any of these articles, and that is AI,
Oh, interesting.
artificial intelligence. I mean, it seems like AI is everywhere these days, and I'm just curious to get your take on how AI might impact all of this stuff, liability insurance, the whole 9 yards.
That's a great question, and that's probably a whole other deep dive right there.
Right.
I mean, we're already seeing AI being used in ways that have, serious implications for liability.
Okay.
Think about self-driving cars.
Oh, yeah.
AI is making split-second decisions that could lead to accidents.
Right.
Or in healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
AI is being used to diagnose patients,
Uh-huh.
to recommend treatments, and if something goes wrong,
Yeah.
who's liable?
That's a great question.
It's a big question.
It is.
It is a big question, yeah, and I think, it's a double-edged sword, right?
Okay.
I mean, AI can be used to improve safety,
Yeah.
to detect potential hazards,
Yeah.
But it also creates new risks, you know?
Right, like who's responsible when the AI messes up?
Exactly. And that's where the legal and insurance frameworks are still trying to catch up.
Yeah, it's like we're building the plane as we're flying it.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and for businesses, I mean, this is something they need to be thinking about now,
Absolutely.
right? You can't just wait until something happens.
You got to be proactive.
Okay, well, this has been a really fascinating conversation. I feel like we've learned a lot about what's in store for general liability insurance in 2025.
A lot of changes coming.
Yeah, a lot of
Oh.
changes. We talked about the good news, the market stabilizing, but then also these challenges, social inflation,
Right.
biometric data, active assailant incidents,
Uh-huh.
and now this whole AI thing. It's a lot to keep track of.
It is, but I think, the key takeaway is that by just being aware of these issues, you're already ahead of the game.
Okay, so knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
All right, well, that's a great place to leave it. I really appreciate your insights as always.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening out there, thanks for joining us on the deep dive.